Okay, welcome back to Score on Business, and our next guest is David Fredrickson, who is the founder and CEO of PatientFocus, a healthcare billing company. They serve as an extension of the business office and provide happier patients for the provider, more time for the billing office, and more cash for the bottom line. Also, David was recently recognized as one of Nashville's most admired CEOs by the Nashville Business Journal, and congrats on that.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
Sure.
So, David, before founding PatientFocus 8 years ago, you were a healthcare finance professional. And tell us about, so 8 years ago, you worked in the industry, and how did you, this is a question to get you to teach strategy. How did that strategy develop to start PatientFocus?
Sure. I noticed a gap when it came to patient pay. In other words, in terms of how what happens to an insurance claim after a doctor's visit or hospital stay. What I was noticing was there's a lot of pressure on what insurance companies were paying hospitals and physicians, and more of that money was getting pushed to patients in the form of high deductibles, co-insurance, and non-covered expenses, basically. I worked for a company here in town called Insight Healthcare Financial, and we were an intermediary between healthcare providers and banks who were lending money to these providers. And one of the things that the banks wanted to understand was how much are these healthcare providers billing to the commercial payers. And they would loan money based on that. Well, they wouldn't loan any money based on the outstanding bills to patients. None, zero. They said it was worthless, patients don't pay their bills. And but I also noticed that pool was getting bigger and bigger and wider and deeper, and the hospitals and the physicians were struggling to collect that money from patients. Mm-hmm. The banks had a point. So the idea came that maybe there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to bill the patients and help them understand their bills, and maybe you can collect more of that money as a provider.
It's a really kind of a thumbnail sketch of what you said. Is you were in the industry and you just paid attention to what was going on and paid attention to an area where somebody that could be a prospective customer was being hurt. They weren't able to get loans. So I think that's really good, and time is just making this a bigger deal.
No, it's getting bigger and bigger. I mean, patients are paying more and more of the entire hospital bill, healthcare bill. The CEO of Cigna said recently that within the next 2 years, patients will be paying for over 50% of every dollar spent in healthcare.
Yeah. Yes. So, what advice would you give to early stage entrepreneurs?
A couple things. One is never give up. There's no reason to. Secondly, hire the best. Overshoot. Hire the absolute best possible people that you can. If you have to stretch, do it. Those people are everything. Your team is everything. Mm-hmm. So the better people you have that you're working with, the better off you're going to be.
You all have, I have some familiarity with PatientFocus. You all have done a phenomenal job there, and it's really paid off. Yeah, so tell us about a client and how you've helped them.
Sure. When we first launched, we had a program for our smaller hospitals where we would provide a guarantee of our performance. In other words, we would advance them cash up front based on what they gave us to go collect from patients. And if we went over that hurdle, we would split the upside. We were working with a real small hospital down in Florida that was struggling to make payroll. They didn't know if they were going to make it by the end of the week, and we signed them up and cut them a check for $200,000, and went on to collect more money from them than they'd ever collected before. Kept their lights on, helped them through that, and since that time they've turned the hospital around and done a really great job. And I think PatientFocus played a meaningful role in that.
Oh yeah, that had to feel good.
Yes, absolutely.
So, what do entrepreneurs need to know when it comes to obtaining funding? And kind of a part of that is many people think it's going to be a lot easier to get funding than it is. So can you talk about that?
Sure. It's interesting. One thing to keep in mind is that size is relative in terms of what is a startup capital need. For startup financing for someone on the West Coast, they may say, "Oh, startup capital, $20 million." That's one large startup.
Yeah.
So keep in mind of who you're talking to and ask them when they say small. Define small. Secondly, is the world of money out there. It's not a sea of money; it's a sea of buckets, and it's a function of finding the right bucket. Because what may be an out-of-the-park home run investment for one group is the last thing in the world that another group would do. Mm-hmm. So you're going to turn over a lot of rocks. You've got to keep your story short and simple when you're pitching, mm-hmm. And as clear as possible, and boil it down to as few words as possible, and understand that these people with whom you're speaking have the attention span of a gnat. And so it's important to keep your message succinct and to the point. And getting to a quick no is so much better than a long, drawn-out maybe.
That the quick no is a blessing.
Yes.
A lot of times.
Absolutely.
A lot of times. So let's talk a little bit more about getting funding. If you look at in this market in Middle Tennessee, because that's who the viewers are, they're not going to, primarily they won't be the $20 million folks.
No.
They may need $1 million or $2 million to get started. So what are some, to kind of dig down a little bit below what you've said before, how do they need to prepare to have a chance of getting money? They're probably not going to get it from the bank, so they're probably going to have to go to angel investors. What do they need to do to have a fighting chance?
Well, for starters, if you're in Nashville and you're trying to raise angel money, there is no better place I'm aware of to raise capital from angels. The angel community in Nashville is second to none. It's phenomenal. Now, I'm raising money in healthcare, so there's a lot of folks who understand in healthcare and they live and breathe it. So it's an easier angel community
Right.
in that regard.
Yeah.
And in that regard, it's second to none. It's a function of being prepared when you speak to them, and have an ask. I mean, ask for the sale when it boils down to it. Know what you're asking for, and know what the client, the investor wants. Mm-hmm. Do they looking for an exit? Do they have a time frame? Are they doing this out of a fund, or is it out of their own pocket? The thing to keep in mind about angels, no matter where they are, is they're betting on you. Not necessarily the company or the idea. They're betting on you.
On the actual entrepreneur.
On the entrepreneur, because and when you're starting up, that's really all you have before you have anything. So that's the bet they're making.
Okay. And what are a couple of tips for people to once people understand that if they make the investment, they're betting on them, on the entrepreneur, what can they do to polish themselves up a little bit? Or that didn't come out right, but what can they do to put their best foot forward?
I always tell my team that it is not hard to look sophisticated. It is not hard to print out an extra label rather than writing something out by hand. It is not hard to have professional business cards printed. It is not expensive anymore to print in color. Mm-hmm. Going the extra, couple of feet, forget about the mile, can really, really make a difference. You can have the best idea in the world, but unless you can present it in such a way that is digestible and pleasant and quick, you're lost.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you all do, a little bit about the process when the billing is outsourced to you. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the process from what you're doing for the hospital.
Sure. From the patient's perspective, they are still dealing directly with the hospital. That never changes because we function as an extension of our clients' billing offices. So from the patient's perspective, nothing changes. From the client's perspective, as soon as they have finished billing insurance has been adjudicated, and it's and now if there's a balance, and I don't know about you, but I've got a high deductible, so there's always a balance.
Right.
Then that's when we take over, and so we have an automatic data feed that comes from the client to our systems, and we go to work, and so we know which patients owe what amounts and what's been updated and what's new, and we load that into our system, and we drop statements in the mail, and we make phone calls, we send emails and text messages, and we stand up a portal for the patients to log on and pay their bills, and it's all branded for the client, so the patients again are dealing directly with the hospital, and in fact they are. It just happens to be we're the ones facilitating it.
Right. So you've taken a process that needed some help and helped it.
It did. It needed help in terms of logistics, but it also needed help in terms of customer service.
Okay. Hey, I'm sorry. We've run out of time. So,
sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.